because that's the one place where their mistakes would be brought to the forefront.
The unwillingness of hospitals and doctors to push for more autopsies worries Dr. Lundberg, editor of the AMA Journal.
I think if I'm the daughter or the husband of someone who just died, I'd like to know why they died. I think I have a right to know what happened.
I'm not sure that I want to know that much.
Wouldn't you like the doctor to learn from that autopsy? Wouldn't you like the medical students around there to be able to learn in some way from the death of your loved one, so there's a benefit to society? Wouldn't you like the vital statistics of the United States to be accurate so we can know how to schedule money for research, for example?
Much of that information is supposed to come from teaching hospitals, like King Drew Medical Center. Yet that hospital's own autopsy rate is...
Oh, I would say probably around 2 or 3%. Not very much at all.
A major teaching hospital in Los Angeles told us that their autopsy rate was about 2 to 3%. A major teaching hospital.
I would say that is a non-teaching hospital. And frankly, if I had the power, I would threaten them with loss of accreditation of all of their teaching programs.
Because?
Because they're not looking for the truth in the people who die.
Is King Hospital an exception? Hardly. We did our own first of its kind computer analysis of over 320,000 deaths in the state of Ohio.
I'd like your reaction to what we found. The Ohio State autopsy rate is 8.5%, good or bad?
Dreadful.
Several hospitals in our study did not perform a single autopsy in 1996, the most recent year available. Half a century ago, the autopsy rate would have been around 50%.
You don't like to ask for them. You don't like to walk up to somebody whose family just died and ask them, can you vivisect the body? It's just not a popular thing to do.
Not just unpopular, but largely unnecessary, say some doctors.
A lot of clinical doctors began to think that they didn't need the autopsy anymore because they had fancy lab tests, imaging devices, all sorts of new technology that would answer all those questions. And in theory, they were largely right. But in practice, they've never been right.
And medical studies explain why.
You look at specifically the last 40 years, decade by decade by decade by decade, and the frequency with which the cause of death is erroneously diagnosed by the clinical doctors has changed little.
Fearful that these physician errors might become known, risk managers at some hospitals are doing more than simply not suggesting autopsies. Some of these risk managers have been accused of masquerading as patient advocates to keep families from filing costly malpractice suits.
Martin Murillo, the hospital risk manager did to him after his mother died.
She introduced herself as a patient advocate, and she attempted to console me and as well as other family members. I didn't know she was a risk manager.
Murillo says the risk manager never suggested an autopsy.
No, she didn't.
She did not?
No.
Why do you think she failed to say, we've got to do an autopsy?
I had a feeling then, and I have a feeling now, that she didn't want the truth to be uncovered.
Murillo later asked for an independent autopsy. The hospital where his mother was treated, Paradise Valley Hospital in San Diego County, declined our request for an interview, but denies any wrongdoing. Atlanta malpractice attorney Don Keenan blames risk managers inside hospitals for helping to kill the autopsy.
You'd think a risk manager would help deter mistakes and make medicine better. The only thing a risk manager does today is, after the mistake has been made, try to figure out how to cover the thing up.
And to cover up is exactly what Dana and Joe Stott say happened when their newborn baby died unexpectedly in an Atlanta hospital. They asked for an autopsy.
And then this lady that came in as the grief counselor told me, well, I understand that you've decided to have an autopsy. She said, well, you realize this is not really going to tell you anything that you don't already know. You don't really need an autopsy. And
this is the grief counselor?
The grief counselor.
Well, we thought it was the grief counselor.
She was the risk manager of the hospital.
The Stotts sued hospital officials who they suspected were trying to cover up the fact that the hospital botched the delivery, starving their baby of oxygen and thus causing his death. Their lawyer was Don Keenan.
that these very people who you've placed trust in are coming to you with outstretched arms of love and compassion, telling you that you have to put this behind you, that it's not bring back the dead. And worse yet, don't desecrate the body. Let the body go to heaven without this. The only kind of grief that they're trying to counsel is the hospital's grief after they get sued for malpractice.
The hospital simply just wanted to bury its mistake, is what you're saying.
In fact, did bury the mistake.
The Stotts settled with the hospital for an undisclosed sum. Their settlement would not permit them to name the hospital.
Risk management in many institutions in this country is designed to suppress truth.
The irony is that by hiding their mistakes, risk managers may cost hospitals more in the end than if they'd found and admitted the errors up front.
Enlightened risk management recognizes that by finding the truth, they will usually be able to defend the hospital better by having the facts, and if there are problems found, settle quickly and fairly, and then prevent those problems from harming future patients.
If they had told you the truth from the beginning, would you have sued?
No.
No.
Because?
I understand, you know, as hard as it would have been, everybody makes mistakes.
Derek Hamilton says his father might have forgiven the hospital's mistakes, but never their refusal to own up to them.
That was something that he absolutely drilled into me, that you had to be responsible for your actions and you were accountable, and when you screwed up, you raised your hand and said, it was on me, and I will fix it.
Some hospitals complain that no one will reimburse them for the cost of doing autopsies, but Dr. Lundberg says that's not always true. He says that Medicare pays for some of the autopsy costs, but that hospitals prefer to keep that money as profit.